All right. Welcome back everyone dito sa Deep Dive. Officially, ito na po. We have passed a new milestone. More than 1,000 episodes na po tayo on our Deep Dive, under our Deep Dive banner. Obviously, kung titignan mo yung the totality of our vlogs and all, siguro we are in thousands, several thousands, siguro dalawang or 3,000 nang na-upload natin, including on our YouTube channel, among others. But as Deep Dive, as podcast of Deep Dive, officially we have passed 1,000 episodes, which tells you gaano tayo ka-invested dito sa maliit natin na proyekto, or some would even say yung maliit natin kilusan. So let me first of all thank everyone very much. Yes, including mga haters natin and trolls. But kidding aside, of course, yung mga supporters natin, mga originally ka-meta natin na naging ka-deep divers natin na mga kasama natin dito. People who are joining us, supporting us through prayers, through good wishes, to great comments, to great suggestions, through constructive criticism, which we always welcome, and that's why we constantly try to improve. And of course, all sorts of different supports that you have been, making sure na to undergird itong effort natin. As you know, hindi madali to have a semi or increasingly professionalized approach dito sa vlogging. What started as kind of a hobby, as a way to get things out, as a way to make sense out of the 2022 elections, eventually, I thank God, nag-crystallize into something much more solid, something more robust. And now, of course, we're in a position to have all of these different studio style, production style kind of approaches. And none of this would have been possible if not for the enthusiasm, for the support that you guys have ensured throughout the years. Of course, whether ito yung membership and subscription nyo sa different channels natin, whether ito yung mga stars, whether ito yung mga stickers, and all sorts of different support that you have sent throughout the years. Ito ba ay hindi lang tumulong sa atin pagdating sa logistics and the basically like the material reality of itong podcast natin, but it also gave us a sense na baka naman may pake din ng tao sa sinasabi natin, because sometimes it can get very lonely, sometimes it can get very tough kasi inisip mo may pakibang tao sa sinasabi natin, meron bang saysay itong sinasabi natin, or alam mo may saysay yung sinasabi nyo, but are we getting across? Is the message getting across? Are we resonating, kumbaga? Syempre, at the end of the day, tao lang tayo. Enthusiasm can carry you through one episode, maybe 10 episode, maybe even 100 episode. But if you're gonna do 1,000 episode or thousands of different episodes, hindi na po enthusiasm lang yan. Dedication na yan. Commitment na yan. Basically, it's institutionalized na yan, di ba? So that's why I always keep in mind na we wouldn't have come this far if not for the support of all of you guys. So thank you so much again for being there. And yes, I'll be honest, trial and error naman tayo dito eh. I mean, if it's television, you know what's my deal. The way I'm gonna do it on television. If it's in a classroom, graduate studies, you know how I'm gonna approach it. If it's a lecture, if it's a panel talk, if it's a world forum, alam niyo na yung approach ko. You can just watch all of yung mga videos na in-upload natin from our interviews, BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, our talks in Europe, Japan, US, Australia, Singapore, even China, all of that. You can check that out. But vlogging was always something quite challenging because di tayo sigurado, like, are we gonna get across? May pakibang tao sa sinasabi natin? Makaka-relate bang tao sa sinasabi natin? Is this too specialized, or masyado ba itong, I don't want to use the word technical, but masyado ba itong esoteric, masyado ba itong moot or academic? So obviously trial and error tayo. So I think some people are it's interesting that some people try to assess the totality ng ating approach by looking at one vlog or one post, an intervention, when in fact it should be the totality of it, no? But to be honest, we have been on a trial and error mode throughout the past 3 years or so, and thank God naman, it looks like it's resonating. Can we improve? Obviously we can improve, and as we get to have more followers, more constructive criticisms, as we get to know more of our followers, some of them popping up here and there all across the world, as we get more support and feedbacks from you guys, the more we can fine-tune itong approach natin sa vlogging. So I've been very conscious not to make these vlogs an extension of what I already do on television, dun sa TV shows natin, or yung latest TV show natin sa One News, TV5, View from Manila. That's the more serious version natin, a long conversation. I always wanted to make sure it's not also an extension of yung mga lectures na binibigay natin sa classrooms, right? extension in the sense that you don't just replicate it on a one-to-one basis, no? So parati natin sinisigurado na um, it's something unique, it's something distinct, and you are basically showing a different version of yourself. Exactly. So that's why it's trial and error. So I really appreciate, guys. Pasensya na lang kung masyadong pabebe tayo or pabibo tayo or minsan you get excited. But honestly, I'm not sorry. To be honest, I was never sorry because I knew this was part of a learning curve, and this was part of a trial and error fine tuning. And 1,000 episodes in into deep dive and thousands of episodes in into our vlogs, I think, thank God, we have come a long, long way. But then again, we can always improve. We can always move forward, and we can always diversify. One of the things that I feel very lucky about is also in collaboration. When you invite other people to come in your TV show or to be with you in some sort of formal setting, it's not that hard because established yung mga platforms na yan eh. But I feel very, very grateful na on our podcast, personal podcast, despite, di naman, wala naman tayong pangbigay ng honorarium or gift, hindi naman tayo na prestigious na institution na established for people to just take that, as a kind of a, basically, intellectual compensation in itself, diba? So, I think we have to be also very grateful dun sa ating mga collaborators, and I mean it in the greatest sense of the word. Whether it's just Scorpio has consistently been with us, almost weekly on average, or at least twice a month. Whether it's Sir Ronald Liamas, we have had him at least once a week. Whether ito yung mga kakolabs natin ng mga ibang vloggers, from Mark to Chris, whether ito yung mga regular expert guests natin from Admiral, to the Admiral Ong, for instance, and Attorney Christina Conti. So we feel very, very grateful now we have had all of these kinds of guests, and we're hoping to actually expand this further. Kung hindi lang sana traffic and all of that kanina, we're hoping to have a Professor Jean Franco, a good friend of ours, and a colleague of ours from University of the Philippines, Dilimanto, also join us here, but we'll reschedule it siguro tomorrow. And then, of course, we have all of these young collaborators, whether it's Dr. Lisandro Claudio from Berkeley, whether it's Attorney Dino De Leon, whether it's Prof. Cliff Arguelles. So I feel extremely, extremely privileged to have had all of these great people who are willing to share their time and effort with us, even if maliit lang naman, hampas lupa lang naman yung ating mga sorry, ang ating mga platforms. But so thank you so much sa kanila rin. Really, really thank you sa kanila for giving their time and efforts. And ako naman, I'm grateful in my own ways. Yes, Ilocano ako, but at the same time, very grateful. Actually, they go together. I meant Ilocano in sense na, hindi lang tayo ganyan, diba? But I always make sure in my own little ways I can always show my gratitude dun sa mga guests natin. So very, very grateful for that. Very, very thankful for that. And thank you also sa mga followers natin from all over the world. Now, having said that, the reason why also coming up to 1,000 episodes on our deep dive platform alone has been quite a challenge is because obviously pag pinag-usapan mo ang politika, di ba dalawa yan relihiyon at saka politika, talking those two things is always going to be challenging because no matter how objective, no matter how fair, no matter how polite you are, someone may feel offended, right? Because unfortunately, we live in a world whereby there's a lot of tribalism, there's a lot of partisanship, yes, fanaticism even, right? So one of the things that we always found challenging is how are we going to navigate that? Because ayaw naman natin to go down the road yung ginagawa ng ibang vloggers na basically they're just there as a mouthpiece of a politician XYZ. Alam naman natin kung sino mga yan. Or worse, mga bayaran na vloggers are basically there to just regurgitate certain talking points. Throughout the years, throughout the episodes, ang daming nagalit sa atin from different sides. But I always took it as a badge of honor. That means we are sovereign minds, we are independent-minded people. But that doesn't mean na gusto natin kaaway lahat. No, I never wanted to be an iconoclast. I don't find it cool na lahat awayin mo just to say ikaw ang pinakamagaling. No, I don't think that's a healthy way. Yes, I've criticized all sides because no side is perfect. And yes, I've incorporated some of the constructive criticism throughout the years because I'm also not perfect. But I think what we have tried to do here is create some sort of a safe space kung saan kahit sinong followers mo, kahit anong political persuasion mo, to a certain degree, you can find something something reasonable about our discussions here. Now, obviously, yung mga ka-DDS natin, I'm sure hindi natuwa sa 80% or 90% ng mga sinabi natin, but I'm happy that, there are many people from Davao, from Mindanao listening to us who may not agree with what we say, but they can see where we're coming from. I'm also happy that people, whether from the pink side, whether from the pro Marcos side, whether from the non-party side, clearly are watching us because they send us message, they send us their gratitude, they send us their constructive feedbacks, they send their questions, their queries, their requests. No, so it's not easy. It's not easy, and you know it's one thing to teach people in a university context when you can grade students and you have that kind of authority and leverage. Basically, you have an automatic leverage or authority, rather, not leverage but authority. Sorry, authority. um, it's different thing. You're invited as an expert sa isang television because you're again seen as an authority. Iba yung nasa vlog when you're competing with all of these vloggers with microphones and kung ano ng katrasyan ng ginagawa nilang kaewanan. You're also so it's a different challenge and you're competing with that, and wala na yung mga formal guardrails, no. I mean, and tayo matapang tayo, we do things live, di ba? Walang script, just go with it, just go with the flow, just explain things. Sometimes Socratic method, sometimes Aristotelian method, sometimes Haydarian method, right? Now, having said that, obviously, the past week was quite challenging because we saw a lot of our friends pushing back against some of the interventions we have made in different ways, right? Or mas malungkot pa ito para sa akin, people who should have known better engage in certain line of argumentation na sa aking palagay ay hindi tugma doon sa ating adikain at hindi tugma doon sa ating mga supposedly pinapanindigan, diba? So I have been quite disappointed, but to be honest, things have not been as challenging as I thought. I thought things would get crazier and more out of control, which probably means that many people or most people actually agree with where we're coming from. But I just wanted to explain bakit napaka-spirited yung ating interventions over the past week on this whole issue of sino dapat nasa majority, sino dapat sa minority. Because for me, it reflects yung challenge ng public education sa atin. It reflects the challenge of political literacy sa atin. And it reflects the challenge of, I think, complacency and mediocrity sa ating politika. So that's why I felt it's very, very important that even if baka marami sa ating followers ay hindi agree sa atin, marami tao magalit sa atin, marami tao hindi na sumasagot sa atin, okay lang sa akin, para sa akin yan. Because at least, magkakaalaman tayo dito, di ba? And at the very least, at least, we can express our opinion and make our stance very clear on certain issues. And at worst, at least, this is a transition phase to move to the next level. Now, let me be more specific about this, no? As I said, the reason why I took issue with Bam and Kiko joining potentially the majority, which looks like almost a certainty at this point in time. I mean, if for some reason it didn't happen, maybe pressure worked, but whatever. Is on multiple levels, right? And then idikit natin itong micro-intervention argument natin into a bigger context about the Philippine political landscape and what we want to see sa ating demokrasya in the next 5 to 10 years, right? And then idikit din natin dun sa ating very important point about Project 2028, right? So, as you have seen in my earlier interviews and interventions and discussions, there are a couple of key questions I raised. First of all, I think in terms of optics, I'm still disappointed not to see Kiko, Bam, and Risa together in one press conference explaining things. So basically, all their supporters and the rest of us who are wondering why are you not in the same team. So I hope to see that. And I think it's never too late for that. And I'm cautiously optimistic it will happen at some point. The earlier, the better. So one thing is optics. Seeing them in one picture is important because that was the whole point of them campaigning together, right? Now, even better if Leni's there, even better if Leila is there, even better if Chell is there, the whole Checky Bam, the whole progressive bloc, right? So that's the optics part. The second part is, honestly, I wanna see more explanation, and that's why I was looking forward to our discussion with Professor Jean Franco, because Dr. Franco actually served as a Senate staff back in the day, so she knows a lot about the inner dynamics and mechanics of Senate. Because to be honest, and you could see this in my discussion with Justice Carpio, with Secretary Llamas, among others, it's not clear to us how joining the majority is the only and the best way to be an effective senator. It's not intuitive. I would even say it's not empirical, or it's not substantiated on an empirical level. Because we have a clear example of people throughout the years, including sila Kiko, who were minority in the past and still managed to get a lot of things across the line. Pagdating kay Risa, alam na alam natin yan, she has been minority, and she chose over and over again to be minority. She had a choice to be in majority when Mig Zubiri was replaced by Cheese. She didn't do that. Now naman, she again is choosing to be in minority. By the way, by default, naging minority yung iba because hindi sila nanalo to be Senate President. I'm talking about Tito Soto, for instance. Default yun na naging minority siya. Now, we'll get to that argument later on. But the other thing for me is, it's not very clear to me, empirically speaking, how being part of majority is the only way to be effective. I think that argument actually could more make sense in the lower house, whereby yung power of the speaker is, I mean, the preponderance of the power of the speaker is quite, I think, self-evident, right? Kumbaga, kung you're not on the right side of the speaker, basically, if you're in minority in the Congress and there are 300 of you out there, it's very hard to stand out, right? Or to get things done. Mas intuitive sa akin and mas empirically proven sa akin yan in the context of Congress, which makes it even more impressive that Leila de Lima and Chel Jokno decided against joining the majority, despite, for a fact, alam natin na maraming beses they were offered to be part of that majority. And still they decided not to be part of that majority. So for me, again, intuitively and also as a matter of empirical evidence, hindi masyadong clear sa akin yan. And then, of course, there's the more important issue. And this is where there's a big picture element to this. Ilan na nga lang kayo dyan sa so-called progressive, independent bloc, whatever you want to call it. And if you cannot concentrate your forces into one side, how are you going to be effective? Because, I mean, logically, the more coherent you are, the more effective you are. Case in point is the DDS7, and case in point is how Bongo, Bato, and Robin Hood being solidly together, that has given them tremendous amount of influence within the Senate. In fact, the DDS bloc, basically, so those three plus Aimee plus the two Villars, and you can put a few others there, maybe JV, etc. These people have a tremendous influence in shaping the dynamics dyan sa Senado because they're coherent. They work together, right? Especially those, well, at least the five that I mentioned a while ago. Cynthia Villar, wala na siya. So, and you can see how aggressive they are, and you can see how important it is, no? So that coherence is very, very important. Now, yung concentration of force gives you a multiplier effect. I'm not sure exactly how, by spreading people, some in minority, some in majority, that concentration can happen. Now, if the majority is the power block, using the theory of power block, we know that within that power block, hegemonic yung DDS7. So again, I'm not sure how the minority-majority argument works. The other, of course, layer of argument also here is this. Alam natin there's no free lunch in politics. Chis Escudero, sa pagkaalam natin, he was able to secure a sufficient number of people already to sustain his majority because he did good enough for certain people to basically make sure hindi mangyari yung trial per se, or even try to even get it in a certain direction for it to be sabotaged. So, hindi natin kailangan ulitin lahat ng mga boy kilay arguments natin, diba? So, joining him, I think is gonna come with certain understanding that you're basically making parang vote of confidence kay Cheese yan, which doesn't look good, and I'm not sure how you can justify that. But more importantly, is there a quid pro quo? Or if there is a quid pro quo, which we should assume that's how things work, what is a quid pro quo here? And for us to say na, well, as long as okay lang sila na magkakaroon ng trial and that's good enough, well, that misses the point, right? Because first of all, speaking of the trial itself, we have to make sure this trial happens, but also this trial is a legit trial. Hindi siya Mickey Mouse trial, meaning money trail, other important issues, subpoenaing of evidences, etc. All of that should be allowed. None of that is a given. So just to say, oh, well, there'll be majority, but they're going to be okay naman with the trial, so that's good enough, that misses the point because that's not the whole point. More than that, hindi lang naman yun ang issue sa Senado eh. The majority may push for some very problematic legislation. The majority may push for very problematic, hearings. Uh, should I spell it out? Mark Waleta, if Blue Ribbon Committee, what kind of hearings is going to call for? I'm having a hard time saying you being part of a majority and then constantly criticizing some of the things that the DDS bloc will do. Oh, by the way, Mark Waleta is also part of that. So you get what I'm saying. So I think it's quite naive for people to say, no, wala, ano na, you're just there with, as long as you keep, Cheese as Senate President, okay na yan, and then you can do whatever you want, and you can criticize Cheese and DDS and all of that. So I'm not sure I'm very convinced with that argument. So I wanted to hear more reassurance on that, and I'm not hearing reassurance so far. Basically, what I'm hearing is that, wag na kayo mag-ingay, wag na kayo mag-OA, or wag kayo mag-emotional. And then, of course, this is the bigger point, diba? This is the bigger point. Kung titignan mo yung politika, by the way, ang dami pala natin mga kaibigan na sumasali sa atin from Davao and Mindanao and mga others. Alam ko actually marami na sa atin from Davao because I can see that in analytics, parang top 4, top 5. Mas marami na sa atin from Mindanao and Davao and all our friends than my own people in Baguio, right? But anyway, this goes back to the big issue. Saan galing yung aming interventions? Ano yung paradigm namin? Ano yung pananaw namin sa politika? Ito po yung pananaw natin sa politika. Wala tayong tunay na demokrasya sa Pilipinas for a whole range of reasons. You look at our economy, 40 richest families dominating much of the economic, commanding heights of the economy. A few conglomerates control almost all key services and industries. That in itself is already alarm bells. If you look at our political institutions, it's probably even worse. Just a few dozens of political dynasties basically control most of our elected offices, right? This is the concentration of power in the hands of people, in a few people, whether it's in politics, elected office, or in business, and sometimes billiards. When you put them together, it's among the worst in the world, among the worst in Asia, and pretty embarrassing for a country who has had experience with elections or supposedly competitive elections as long as we have had. Dapat nga tayo yung pinaka-oldest democracy in Asia, and yet look at how basically parang joke yung democracy natin if you look at how just a few people control everything, right? Parang name recognition pa lang, galing ka lang sa pamilya na to or ganun, automatically given na you're gonna have a shot at this office or that office. So the entry barriers are very high, and basically meron tayong monopolistic system, economically and politically. So, starting from that point of view, hindi tayo dapat magtataka na ang taas ng corruption, pero ang taas ng incompetence because a lot of people get into office or a lot of people are in charge of businesses not because they're smart, not because they have the merit, no, because they come from a certain family, right? So it's just like how monopolies become mediocre or worse than that in terms of provision of services. Kung limited lang yung mga suppliers ng ganitong produkto, edi ang gagawin nila, maximum profit, minimum quality, and minimum cost, right? Ganon din sa politika. So if you look at it, logically, how are you going to change that system? Right? Logically, how are you going to change that system? You're not going to change that system by just playing within that system. Because guess what? Yun yung ginawa naman ng mga reformist liberal. If you look at yung mga liberal party, if you look at yung ating traditional liberals, did they do anything concrete to break the control of conglomerates on our economy? Please cite me specific legislations or policies. The person who came closest to that were Ramos. Mahabang usap na yan because Ramos used allegedly intelligence services, etc., to bully some of the corporations to be open to opening up or privatization of certain sectors like telecom, etc. And then the other one is Digong. But with Digong, it was more like attacking mga dilaw na oligarchs, and the next thing may sariling oligarchs din siya, Duterte-garchs, I call them. But nevertheless, compared even to those two individuals, what were the concrete efforts by any of the liberal stalwarts or reformist administrations to go against that? You don't believe me? Look at Ronald Llamas, who himself served in one of these liberal administration, and he himself, aaminin niya, na there was no concrete effort to go after concentration of power. In fact, in 2013, if you look at the data, yung ating Kongreso was dominated by trapos. And then things just got worse from 2016 and onwards. So for me, it's very clear that our conventional reformist liberal approach is a big failure. Because if it were such a success, why did we end up with Duterte and Marcos successively in 2016 and 2022? Why are still majority of our big businesses and top offices concentrated in the hands of few families? Right? So, may problema talagang reformism. The liberal reformist project in the Philippines is a big failure in many ways. They're not evil, obviously. They're not bad. Obviously, they did many good things, but never good enough. Because if they were good enough, we wouldn't be in this situation to begin with. That is why fundamentally, your analysis would be this. Hindi mo mababago yung isang sistema. Basically, this is what Einstein said, right? You cannot solve a problem with the same state of mind that gave birth to that problem, right? So, hindi mo mababago yung sistema. Hindi mo maayos yung sistema. Kung yung paraan, yung strategy mo is basically doing what we used to do before, which didn't work, right? Because if it were so successful, why did we end up with Duterte? If we were so good in strengthening our education system, instituting critical thinking, safeguarding our information space from disinformation, by the way, we didn't do any of those things, we wouldn't end up with the Duterte, right? And guess what? Also Marcos later on. So, what I'm saying here is that wag natin kalimutan the big failures of the liberal reformist project. It was good in a sense that hindi sila super corrupt, hindi sila mamatay tao, hindi sila tuta ng China. Good. Basics lang yan. But did they fund